Professor Semenza, honor and pleasure to be with you as part of the Artists of Science program in beautiful Crete in Greece. First, I wanted to have a short resume of your successes in science.
We discovered the hypoxia-inducible factors fairly early in my career.
In order for general public to understand the
yeah, so what we were studying how red blood cell production is controlled. And the red blood cells carry oxygen to all of the cells
Correct.
Of the body. And it was known that cells in the kidney are able to sense the available oxygen, and if there's not enough, they make a hormone called erythropoietin, or EPO. And EPO is secreted into the blood and goes to the bone marrow and stimulates red blood cell production. So now you have more red cells carrying more oxygen. The low oxygen or hypoxia is alleviated, and the system is back to normal. So it's a beautiful system for the body to assure that every one of the 50 trillion cells get enough oxygen. If the oxygen is lowered systemically, like if you go to high altitude, and every cell in your body is feeling this low oxygen. But of course, in some disease states, it's only certain parts of your body that are hypoxic or not getting enough oxygen. So if you have a narrowing in your coronary artery and your heart muscle is not getting enough oxygen, well, that's a very specific area, and the body, those cells respond. They feel the hypoxia. They make a series of proteins that stimulate the growth of new blood vessels to bring more oxygen to those cells. And we found out that that process was controlled in the same way as the production of EPO. We first found control areas in the EPO gene that are necessary for the response to low oxygen. And then we found a protein that binds to that DNA to turn on the gene. And we called this hypoxia-inducible factor, meaning it's a protein that gets turned on in response to low oxygen. And we purified the protein, found it had two different subunits. We got the DNA sequences that code for them, so that we had all the molecular tools now that we could study the role of this factor in many different physiological responses, because oxygen is so critical, and then also in disease states, where in some disease states there's a failure to turn on the system. So the patients with coronary artery disease, they don't turn on the system. Why is that, right? And can we overcome that block? And then in other cases, the system is turned on, but in a pathological way. So in cancer, the cancer cells turn on the expression of the hypoxia-inducible factors. And that's good for the cancer, but it's very bad for the patient. And so we want to block the response in that disease state. So my career has been focused on understanding these basic physiological systems, understanding how they relate to disease states, and hopefully intervening to treat those diseases. So now, for example, patients with chronic kidney disease, their kidneys stop making EPO. Well, what was the treatment? Before the 1970s, it was blood transfusion. And of course, blood transfusion carries the risk of viral infections. So when the EPO gene was cloned, it became possible to make EPO in the laboratory, what we call recombinant human EPO. And that could be injected into the patient, and it would stimulate red blood cell production because there's nothing wrong with the bone marrow in the patients. And this was a remarkable treatment for the disease because these kidney failure patients would go to their doctor and say, "Doctor, I feel lousy." And the doctor would say, "Of course you feel lousy, you have kidney disease."
Okay.
But they felt lousy because they were anemic, not because they had kidney disease. And when the anemia was treated, they felt much better.
Correct.
So this really improved the quality of life. But some patients didn't respond. And then, of course, because it's a recombinant protein, it's not really accessible to everyone, right? Because you have to store it in certain ways. And wouldn't it be nice to have a pill that does the same thing? So when we discovered the HIF system, people wanted to know, could we turn on that system pharmacologically? And they found that they could. And so now there's a treatment, and these are pills. They can be taken by mouth. They stimulate EPO production in the same way, but they also do other things that are helpful, such as improving the uptake of iron from the GI tract. Now, of course, you need iron to make hemoglobin, which is the protein in red cells that carries oxygen. So these drugs are starting to be used now. It's for the treatment of anemia in some patients with chronic kidney disease.
So not only you worked on the fundamentals, but you are seeing the application.
That's right. So, obviously,
that's the goal of SIPS, to bring them together.
Yeah, and we make a discovery, but that discovery is published. Many people read about it. They say, how does that apply to what I'm doing, right? And look for the connections. And this happens in all different areas. And as a result, we started by studying one gene, and now we know there are thousands of genes that are involved in all sorts of different responses, physiological or pathological, where people can hopefully target that system therapeutically.
Perfect. So your passion is exceptional in this direction, both in fundamentals and in application. Well, that's SIPS. So glad to hear that. The other, what I wanted to ask, so this passion, it was from the start, why you went in medicine? Why not in law? Why not in social sciences?
Yeah, well, when I was in high school, I had a biology teacher who was exceptional.
Okay.
And she was very unusual for a teacher in my public school system because she had a PhD, she had done research, she had done a postdoc. And so she understood what it was, this whole idea of discovery. So she would impart to us the thrill of the discoveries of different things in biology that we learned, and the people who made those discoveries, and really brought it to life and made it exciting. And so I became interested in biology as a result of her inspirational classes. And I was interested in particular in genetics, because the idea that you could understand the inheritance of different traits.
In high school also?
Yes, the introduction, and then when I went to college, I took all the genetics courses that the school had to offer, and worked in a genetics lab at Children's Hospital in Boston, for 10 to 15 hours a week, and I thought I would get a PhD in genetics and do basic research. But around the time I was a junior in college, we had a family that we were friends with who had a child born with Down syndrome. And this made me interested in medical genetics. And so I decided that I would train both as a physician and a scientist in order to take care of patients with genetic disorders and to do research in genetics.
Well, that's interesting. So, if you go back, 30 years back in high school, would you have chosen the same profession, the same itinerary?
Oh yeah. So I would never go back because. Yes, I mean, there's so many things that I would want to change, particularly my family, right? So, no, it doesn't work, right? You can't just change one thing. No. I mean, for sure, there were things if I could, I would do differently and hopefully do better, right?
Yeah,
with the knowledge we have now.
But not change of the profession.
But you know, the important things, I certainly would never want to change. Yeah.
So if somebody from high school today asks you why you should follow your career, what would be the advice?
No, I don't think they have to follow my career.
Well, just an example. For example, if they have many choices, why it should?
Well, you know, again. Your inspiration, you're saying you never will change the direction, even if you go back in time. Well, so you know what's good about the job?
Yeah.
First of all, we have the freedom to study what we want.
Research.
Do the experiments in the way that we can visualize them, right? And as long as we're productive, no one tells us do this or do that. We get to meet friends all over the world who share our passion, right? And get to visit them in nice places. So this is very nice, right? And so, I mean, I think if you can find a job that you're pretty good at, you know, that makes you happy, because think of all the people who have a job just to get money for their family, right? And they can't wait till they retire, but you spend so much of your life working. It's got to be fulfilling, right?
Fulfilling, and you have to love it.
And if somebody's going to pay you for it, then that's great, right? Then you have it made. And that's the way I feel about the work that I do,
They didn't tell you why in medicine, probably law, you get money easier.
That's right. That became apparent very early on, because when I was in med school, I had a friend, and he was going into anesthesia, which is a very very nicely rewarded career. Why? Because in the U.S., at least, surgeries, procedures, you get much more money for doing procedures to treat a disease compared to doing something to prevent a disease. So the model is, that's the model, right? Where, you want to reward people more for the end of the disease rather than preventing it altogether. So I don't know, but yes, when he heard that I was going into pediatrics, he was concerned. And then when he heard I was going to specialize in genetics, then he became very concerned.
He sees the result today.
Yeah, and it's just been very fulfilling, and no, I wouldn't change anything.
Perfect. So your family is in science, in medicine,
No, so my kids, my daughter's a social worker in New York. And my older son is a graduate student in neuroscience at University of California, San Francisco. He's in his third year of graduate school. And then my younger son works in Denver, where he monitors oil and gas wells for environmental contamination. So yeah, very different careers.
And your wife, profession?
My wife was a molecular biologist, and
almost the same.
Worked in a genotyping lab. Yes, so she also helped physicians study different genetic disorders.
But what is better? To be in the same profession in the family or different professions?
Well, my wife was very good in the lab, right? So it would have been very advantageous to have her in my lab. But I always felt like, no, because I do not want to risk any kind of upset in my marriage, because that's much more important to me. So I said, no, keep your job outside the lab. And
but still in the same field, you're going to discuss the same thing.
We can talk the same language, yes, but
sometimes it doesn't become boring. Same thing? Or
no, because we don't usually talk about science at home.
Oh, okay,
so,
perfect.
We talk about other things.
Let's explain. What about hobbies? What hobbies you have?
Well, I can't say I have a whole lot of time for hobbies, but we enjoy being outdoors, especially in the summer, hiking, kayaking, different outdoor activities. We enjoy going to the beach. So yeah, the summer is always a good time. The family comes together, and we get to do fun things.
How much free time you have? You just mentioned it.
Yeah, you know, not so much. On the weekends, I mean, on the weekends I like to be outside.
Do you switch it off completely, your phones on the weekend?
Yeah, on the weekends I do. I don't. Yeah, I don't switch it off, but I don't look at it. You know, I don't look at the email.
I have not achieved that point yet.
Yeah, and yeah, so I like to do things outside and you know, do a little work on our grounds and
gardens.
Yeah, I like to do it myself. Many people have someone do it for them, but yeah, I enjoy being out on the weekends. In nature.
So you love that, but no sports, no swimming, no.
So when my kids were younger, I coached them in various sports.
Okay.
So I coached all three of them in soccer leagues, and that was a lot of fun. Because when I was in school, I played soccer, and even
you used to play soccer.
Yeah, soccer. I played midfield. Soccer. Even in medical school, we had a team. So we had a team that played other professional schools, and it usually went well, except when we played a team from a law school. Then they spent the whole time arguing over the rules. But otherwise, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, that's so it's a fulfilled life, meaning that this might be another. This interview might attract people going in your direction, fighting cancer. And cancer is one of the major, as we understand, the major killing factors in the United States, correct?
Yes. Yes,
I think it's the second or the first?
It's second, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Second after heart attack, correct?
Cardiovascular.
Yeah. So that's a magnificent field with a lot of opportunities, correct?
Yeah, and of course, you know, one of the things we learned is about, you know, what can we do to prevent disease, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Exercise, you know, have a good diet.
Antioxidant they were mentioning.
Yes, and you know, especially the natural forms.
Oxygen and antioxidant. Oxygen.
Yes, well, you know, so yeah, it's an interesting thing about life on Earth, right? Yeah. Because oxygen, it's very powerful because we can use it to make energy, but then it also has the risk of causing death. Yeah. And we actually think this may have been the first function of the hypoxia-inducible factors, to guide the metabolism of the cell, to decide should we make energy with oxygen or should we do fermentation to make energy.
That's interesting.
Because it's, you know, the HIFs are there even in animals that don't have specialized systems for oxygen delivery, like red blood cells and circulatory and respiratory systems. But every organism has to control its metabolism based on the available oxygen.
So prevention is, because people sometimes think it's controversial. We need the oxygen, but then oxygen over the limit becomes, you need antioxidant.
Well, it's not, obviously you can't take oxygen over the limit unless you go to an oxygen bar. But you know, but there are processes in the body, especially in disease states, right, that generate these oxidants that can be part of the...
They call it oxidative stress.
Yes, exactly.
Oxidative stress.
Exactly.
That means, and we should keep it at the normal level, correct? Yeah. So, you know, I suppose, you know, the system could be set up to generate less oxidant, but maybe then it would also generate less energy. So this is the trade-off, right? Because we have all these cells that's interesting.
That have to work together, and that takes a lot of energy, right? That's why you couldn't have multicellular organisms without respiration.
Correct.
Because it's too energy dependent.
That's very interesting, because one of the antioxidant that it was a paper on that, when you get that, is one of the most powerful anti-oxidative stress in the world, then, but you feel energetic when you get it. So it's kind of, where it is applied, there's a balance between things. So you're saying we need oxygen for energy.
Oh, yes.
but by taking this antioxidant, it's different from the other fields, from the other antioxidants. They're just natural components, but then you feel energetic getting that. So this is a controversy. I mean, not a controversy, as in the contradictions that we have to find probably a new field of research.
Well, you know, especially when it comes to medications, we have to be very careful about placebo effects, right? And, you know, that's why the studies have to be double blind, so nobody knows, because, you know, we have many cases where there's a treatment and it looks like there's a good result, right? But then when a double-blind study is done and the patient doesn't know whether they're getting the treatment or not, that goes away, right? Because this placebo effect is very powerful.
Also, it depends on, you have to have strictly two groups with exactly the same characteristics.
Matching up, yes.
Correct?
Yeah, and again,
how really...
One of the reasons that even positive study results don't get replicated.
Exactly,
right?
because it's not the same group of people.
Exactly.
So it's how many parameters do we don't know?
Too many. Right, and that's also why, you know, we can do these experiments in mice and get dramatic results, right?
Yeah.
Because every mouse is genetically identical, right? And we control their environment, right? So it's identical. And so it's much easier to get results that can be replicated. Although even then, oftentimes results are not replicated. And what we think are identical conditions in one lab and in another are not. Yeah, so this is the challenge, right? When we try to translate our knowledge to medicines, it's a great challenge.
Well,
it keeps us humble because so few times do we succeed.
Well, just I never asked this question, but it's just the issue is that, you know, we have an Academy of Science and Academy of Medicine,
and Academy of Engineering. So those are the three, at least in the U.S., right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But they are all science, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So why you have to say medicine is not science?
Yes, I don't quite understand it.
It's not science.
Yeah, and like I'm a member both of the National Academy of Medicine and the National Academy of Science.
Yeah.
Maybe because I have an MD and a PhD.
Yeah, because that.
But again, not everybody. But there are PhDs in the National Academy of Medicine, and there are MDs in the National Academy of Science.
Correct.
So it's not, you know, it's not sorted just on that basis.
No,
but yes, there's tremendous overlap.
But I mean in a certain different point of view, because medicine should be science, but apparently medicine is not considered science. It's considered mostly a trial and error in applying.
Well, yeah, so you know, it used to be, when they first arose, right, there was a National Academy of Science, and then they had something called the Institute of Medicine. Okay, so it wasn't an academy, and then they decided, okay, we're going to make it into an academy. So, yeah, but obviously, yeah, your point is well taken, and you know, yeah, medical science is right. It's one of the sciences.
I mentioned this when we had my wife had cancer, and I mentioned that I give a challenge to my son to turn medicine into a real science. And that was my exact expression, because I thought that it was trial and error. Try, if it works. If it doesn't work, it dies. The person dies, you know. This was my...
Well, you know, that's what this personal medicine approach is based on, right?
Exactly.
The knowledge that no one therapy will work for every patient, right?
Correct.
And we can't be satisfying saying, oh, we can treat 80% of the patients successfully, because that means there's 20% where we're not successful. And so we need to figure out how to do that, right?
Correct.
And
that's revolutionary.
You know, and
because it eliminates these so many parameters. We just apply in bulk.
Yeah.
The medicine is a bulk application of any medicine, and
Yeah.
see what happens. If organism it works or doesn't work. So you just take a chance.
Yeah. And you know, in some diseases it works very well, right?
Yeah,
if you get strep
depends
throat
sometimes.
and take
Yeah, well,
penicillin,
that's
you will
different
get
story.
better,
Well,
right?
There are simple things, but when we speak about cancer,
Yeah.
the drugs are serious.
Yes.
So you cannot really have errors there. But really, it's enlightening, all this discussion. I thank you very much.
That's been my
It
pleasure.
is, it's a pleasure is mine because it's enlightening, and you are invited next year in Singapore. We're going to send you an invitation, and hopefully we'll have this spirit and this passion always. And you saw Marcos, Professor Rudy Marcos.
Yeah, no, that's an inspiration. Yeah.
101.
That would be.
You were there, correct?
That would be quite something.
You were there this morning?
Yeah.
You were this morning, yeah.
Yeah.
So we decided to do a question and answer because in Panama last year, he gave a normal lecture. He participated in the gala also through Zoom, but the difference of time it makes it difficult because there it was 10:20 p.m. 22nd of October. Here it's 8 a.m. 8:20. But in Panama they said, 100 years old. It should be artificial intelligence, and we don't believe. And this time we decided to do question and answers. There was question from our audience, and he was responding.
Amazing.
So,
Amazing.
so, how many years you have until 21? The minimum what?
What's that?
How many years you have to go? So you have your career goes to at least 101 years old.
No, I don't think so.
Why?
I don't, because there's some things I'd like to do, you know, that
To change a little bit.
yeah, you know, before I die, and so I don't know how much longer my career will go, but yeah, it's been great, and then hopefully we have the next generation to take over.
Yeah, sure, but that's
and to do
normal.
an even better job.
Sure, that's normal, but
Yeah.
you can help the young generation, you know, by with your knowledge. So. But again, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. It's an enlightening, a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise.